Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
Welcome to Getting to Know You. My name is Joe Nash. Today we're going to be talking to Rich Vassi once again. For April is Autism Awareness Month, and Rich works at the Center for Disability Services. So welcome, Rich. Welcome back.
Thank you, Joe. Nice to be here.
Now we got two. You're going to be giving us two perspectives here. You work at the Center for Disability Services. You work with people with autism, and you also have a son who is autistic.
Right.
So why don't we start with talking about how do you define autism? Because I know a lot of conditions, you can say it's X and X or Y, X and Y. It seems from what I've read, autism has a very wide definition, or it's
neurological. It's a neurological disorder, auditory, perhaps, according to some circles. Just the ability or the lack thereof to process information, respond to information that is offered. You know, could I have that pen, please? Yeah. That type of thing. Simple instructions, requests that not only are not followed, but the eye contact's not there and things like that. What the diagnosis is, I think the traditional, the more acceptable diagnosis is that it's a neurological disorder, which does have a lot of effects on speech, motor development, etc. And I think that's the starting point anyway.
But why, from what you know about it, why is there such a wide range? What they call it, the autism spectrum? Is that what they?
Asperger's spectrum, autism spectrum.
Because I've read that they say like 30 years ago people would have been autistic, but no one would have.
The diagnosis might have been 30 years ago, mental retardation.
Oh, okay.
Might have been someone with autism may have been labeled that. So do we have more people with autism, or are we identifying it differently than we did in decades ago? I think that's probably more the case. I don't know that we have this explosion of autistic individuals being, born into our society, as much as we do the same number of people, perhaps, who are just being identified as autistic, as opposed to mentally retarded, etc.
Well, April, this is it's National Autism Awareness Month, but it's also World Autism Awareness Month. So what do you think, like you were just saying, what has changed in the last 20 or 30 years that we're more, not besides more diagnosis, what do you think has brought about this? Here we have a World Awareness Day and a National Day. What do you think has brought this about?
Parent involvement, awareness, parents just, taking more of a proactive approach to the child's care, earlier diagnosis to get answers to questions like I posed to you just a few moments ago. Why isn't my son, my daughter responding to my requests? More and more of that. And, we've become smarter. There's a better communication system, whether it be the internet, letters to the editor, newsletters. There was a Dr. Bernard Rimland that we subscribed to his newsletter years ago. And he had a son, and he was a doctor, and he was a professional, and he had access to publication and published a newsletter, and that got the word out. So now there's power in numbers. Yeah. So as that grows, more and more people are not afraid to identify their child with autism to seek treatment. So I just think the whole idea, how it's grown so much, I think is just a matter of communication and people just searching out remedies.
When is it usually diagnosed? When you? Again, is there a wide range there too?
No, I don't think there is. I think most parents are typical. I think most parents are like my wife and myself. And our son wasn't autistic. He was autistic, he had autistic tendencies. Well, if you have autism, this is what we're talking to. This is what we talk to ourselves about. Well, then we think, geez, if he has autistic tendencies, chances are he's autistic. So, and you go for various diagnoses. You go to your primary care. You go to your pediatrician, and you look for reaching milestones? Is there eye contact there? Are we progressing at a typical rate when it comes to that motor development of creeping and crawling? And you learn these things. You learn the significance of the crawling or the creeping motion. You have big muscle groups alternating, arms and legs, and you're crawling across the floor. Seems routine. Well, there's a lot going on there. You're alternating muscle groups. You're moving forward. You're propelling. A lot of autistic kids don't do that. They miss that stage, and that's something to look out for. So when you get suspicious when you see these milestones not met. So we go to your primary care, your pediatrician, and then you get referred if you have a hunch that something's not right, as probably the doctor would as well. Pediatric neurologists, they're rare. We can find them, but you have to look long and hard to find a good pediatric neurologist, which we were able to do. Now, Joe, we're going back.
Well, I was going to say, this is 20 years ago. Your son's
This is
early
20
20s?
years ago, yeah, easily. 22 years ago, thereabouts.
Okay. And when you say not crawling, what are some of the things you look for besides what you mentioned? When you say not crawling, when he was a child, did he like to sort of
He'd slide
slide
on his elbows, slide forward,
not do the normal,
drag his legs with his arms, and then finally say, "You got to get up, man! Come on!"
So then you finally got a diagnosis.
Got a diagnosis. Another characteristic, though, was tracking, lack of eye contact, and and it stays with me to this day. We went to a pediatric neurologist, and the doctor had a small Tupperware full of Cheerios with a few Cheerios, and kids love Cheerios. They love noise, and the doctor, was sitting there, shaking it,
while he's looking at him,
and never got a rise out of him.
Really?
Never focused on the Cheerios, and the doctor saying, we might have some issues here, and the issue being autism.
And how old was he then?
3.
Oh, 3 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had been
suspicious,
suspecting. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, once you finally got an official
diagnosis, sure.
Then
you go to work. I think, I don't know, maybe it was us, maybe it's a typical response. You don't want to go through a traditional medicine. You don't want your son on this script, that script. I understand parents' position like that. I was there myself.
Well, this is all also before the internet, before you could look up all kinds of stuff, right? Or when 20 years ago would be.
You had some exposure to it.
Okay.
You had some, not a lot, but some. But so, a lot of it was through your network, your sources. The Dr. Rimblade in California, his newsletter, and other sources.
So so you were saying you initially didn't want him to be uncertain?
No, we did resist. Okay. We can do this holistically.
Yeah. And
see where that takes us. Vitamin deficiency, who knows what we have here? And there's all sorts of approaches holistically, which I am not playing down I'm just not. I do believe in that approach.
Yeah.
I also believe in a traditional therapeutic prescribed medicine approach as well.
Okay.
So there's, it took a little while to get there, but there are the benefits from that as well.
Is that still today? Is there a thing where some people want one or the other, or is a combination?
I think by and large people go one way or the other.
Okay.
It's my hunch. Either we're going to go holistic or we're going to go traditional, prescription medication, and then people just find their way through. And with the traditional prescription med approach, there's a lot of trial and error. With these guys, what's working, what's going to stimulate, what's going to be a stimulant, what's going to be a depressant, what's going to help behavior, that you think, and then something you think might help behavior may end up hurting it. Okay. So then there's those titration schedules, which you put the medication into the system and on a slow schedule, slow milligrams until you get to the optimal level. And then you go back the other way if it's not working. So every med change might take 6, 8, 12 weeks. So it's quite interesting to say the least.
Did you initially did you resist the diagnosis? Like before you were saying
Yes. Oh, absolutely. These doctors didn't know what they were talking about.
I mean, did it take you a while to really fully accept that? Is that a common thing with the parents?
I'm sure I'll accept it in a couple more weeks. But, no, I don't know. We had a hunch. You have suspicion.
Yeah.
And
did you have other couples in the same that you knew in the same situation that you were?
no. No, we did not. And that was one of the things, when he went to elementary school, right here at Blue Creek Elementary, so long ago. But, he had friends in the neighborhood, which were really sweet, and it was really nice. And, they'd come to birthday parties, etc. It was great. It was, it was pretty close to Little House on the Prairie, But, and then, then his friends outgrew him. They weren't getting the responses from him. And that's totally understandable. And so then you really start to look for different placements that make sense, different peer groups that make sense.
Okay.
But in terms of resisting the diagnosis, yes, yeah, to a certain extent. But it's easy to blame the doctor.
Yeah.
How could you say such a thing?
Yeah.
That type of approach.
Well, they still don't know, and they don't really know the causes.
No, they don't. No.
It's just
it might be environmental. You can take a guess, you can take a shot at it, but even with the most careful mother-to-be, you can have problems. Some of the other approaches, though, that we did, getting back to this motor development, I would take our son and, we'd work on a balance beam.
Mm-hmm.
I'd work with him on a stationary bike. I'd keep his feet on the pedals, and I would do a lot of hand over hand.
Yeah.
And I was of the belief, the mind-body connection. Okay, the mind needs some stimulation, so let's use the body to do that. And you stir up those endorphins, and you get a general sense of good health, and hopefully that'll push us in the right direction. Before I started working at the Center for Disability Services, I took my son there to swim all the time. As I said earlier, the creeping and crawling in those large muscle groups. Well, the pool was a great neutralizer to get that activity going, to do that motion. And so we did it in the water. And so that was that was helpful.
So then what was the next step? He just, you tried different things, and then as he gets to be, 7, 8, 9?
7, 8, 9, yeah.
Does that condition, does it sort of, I don't know how to ask this, does it stay the same, or does it progress?
I'm glad you did ask.
Or does it?
It gets more intense.
As the
translation, it gets worse in adolescence. I thought, my goodness.
So there is it does change, I guess.
It does. Well, kids change. They grow up, and I think adolescence is probably more of a challenge or frustrating for somebody who's nonverbal, who is autistic, that really doesn't know what changes in the body are going on and doesn't have the ability to communicate it. So, it has to come out in another way, and it did come out in some pretty aggressive behaviors.
Okay. So it does intensify, though, as the child hits adolescence?
Does the autism intensify?
Or is it just a combination of adolescence?
Adolescence, puberty, hormones, growth, spurts, and it all comes at once, and there's no communication.
Okay.
Not to mention, you might have some underlying medical concerns as well, epilepsy.
Okay.
My son had seizures from time to time, so that was a bit of a challenge, and not to mention some of the meds that these guys are typically on for behavior.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have to wonder where all this chemistry is playing in, along with the original diagnosis of autism, along with the frustration and the lack of communication, so it's an uphill climb.
Now, was your situation, was that a typical, or do you know? I mean, again, we keep talking about this wide range.
Right. I think for the more involved kids, the more quote-unquote severe kids who have a lack of communication, I think that's more typical, that acceleration and aggressive behavior perhaps during adolescence. Like we said before, they have a wide spectrum of autism, Asperger's. So those on the higher end, those that can communicate, those that can express themselves, might have a lesser time. I don't have any experience with that level. I wouldn't know. But with the area I have experience in, it's my experience that the behavior does become a bit more aggressive.
Now, when you say aggressive, It's not like your son was punching you out, was he? Or what? I mean, I want to.
Not on his best day.
Okay. All right.
No, he'd be physical.
Just okay.
Somewhat physical, sure.
Yeah.
You know, grabbing, pulling,
Okay.
yelling, lots of yelling. But you know, it's where a strong family unit it's necessary.
Yeah.
Imagine doing this by myself. I don't see it turning out as well as it did, to be honest.
If you were on your own.
If
yeah.
I were on my
Okay.
own, I don't see it turning out as well as it did. But the thing is, you know, you get through adolescence, now we get into young adulthood, getting the school days behind you and work days in front of you, days of productivity, days of reward for effort, and that starts to make sense because, you know, adolescence is starting to become in the rear view mirror here a little bit. So now you have growth, you have progress. My overall message is it gets better.
Okay, so
It
you were
gets
saying
better.
after the adolescent
Yeah.
sort of outburst, it does sort
Right.
of.
And I'm sure a lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of parents can relate to that, you
Yes,
know,
yes.
if their kid's autistic or not.
Yes.
You know, God has blessed me with a boy. I didn't have to go through adolescence with a girl.
Okay.
So,
So that's the one thing. It is more prevalent in males. Than
yes,
boys.
it is.
That's yeah.
So they say statistically, and
yeah.
it's been my, you know, casual observation, certainly non-scientific, but yeah.
Well, when you and your work at the Center for Disability Services in your professional capacity, is it mostly males that have autism that you work with of all ages, or that you can?
Oh, boy, it's thinking, yeah,
It is.
it is. I don't have any exact numbers. I mean, a few
Yeah.
guys come to mind right off the top of my head.
No, I'm just going
And
by
they're
what I
males.
read. It says it's
Right.
way more prevalent.
Yeah, no, that is the common understanding.
Okay, so now you were telling me before we started, your son is in a residential home. Now, what kind of what's the word? Transition was that? I mean, is that?
That
I mean,
was
you're saying
really-
how old is he now?
He's
20?
25.
Oh, 25. Okay,
25, I know.
All right, so what was that transition like? And
It's very good
yeah,
for him. I was surprised.
did you sort of think he maybe was?
Oh, he's a mama's boy.
Okay, yeah.
He's an absolute mama's boy. And, you know, and to a certain extent he still is, which is great. I mean, he shows so much affection now for his mother and his father.
Yeah, he didn't before, or is that
Geez, I don't know. You know, I think we went from expectation.
Yeah.
You know, I'm at home. I expect you to do this and this and this.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm on my own and I kind of like it, but you know, I also kind of miss you guys. And then after 20 minutes, a half hour, I don't miss you so much anymore. Can you please take me back?
So what would you say the biggest change has been now that he's left home and he's 25? Is it,
I think he has a tremendous sense of independence.
okay.
I think he does. Again, he's not communicating. He's nonverbal.
Yeah.
So I have to try to figure this out. And maybe some of it's wishful thinking, what I'd like to think. So maybe that's part of it. But I also have the belief that he's experiencing growth because of his level of independence.
And how many? What's that situation like? How many people does he live with?
There's 7 other people in the house, so it's a
Okay.
house of 8. A wonderful group of staff members, professionals, running the residential program that he's in. It's our Pinewoods residence. It's
It is part of
It's part of the
where
Center
you
for
work.
Disability Services.
So one of your
agency.
things that you guys do is have these residential homes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we have about 51.
51 homes.
51 houses.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And you know, it's a tremendous organization in every sense, and in particular the residential component. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where I had to just go over and talk to the guys. Not so much, a little bit about what was going on with Jonathan, but mostly about what was going on with me, you know, and my transition, you asked about transition.
Yeah.
You know, how about my
I didn't
Joe?
ask about the parents. Before, I didn't.
No, but there's a transition there too,
Yeah.
and it's a positive one. But you know what? There comes to, you miss your son, and you wonder how
Yeah.
he's doing, and all indications are he's doing fine.
Okay.
So in terms of, and I think this is typical. Once the girl moves out of the house, you know, growth has to happen.
Right.
You know, maybe it's baptism by fire, maybe it's just welcoming it with open arms, this opportunity. But growth does happen, you know. people with autism do get better with time, with expectation. We've always had expectations of our son, Jonathan. You know, we never accepted this behavior as something he couldn't control. We never accepted it as this is him and this is the way it's going to be. We've never accepted that to be the case.
Okay.
You know, we've always treated him, you know, to do better. You can do better than this. We expect you to do better than this. And that was the constant message.
Okay, now one thing, in my reading of autism, and I'm just going by PBS shows or reading magazine articles, the message you're giving that things get better, I don't know if I've ever, if I don't, maybe I'm not seeing it, but is that, I don't know if that's a common, I don't really see that as a.
It's been my experience, you know, and it's been my experience with my son and my observation with others.
Okay.
If you, again, you know, as I mentioned before, I work for the Center for Disability Services. We are so fully invested in, as our slogan says, where people get better at life.
Okay.
And it's not just a slogan, it's something we do as parents and as professionals. And I do see people getting better. You know, you might have to look real close.
Yeah.
But when you see a behavior lessening and lessening, when you see a physical capability increasing, that's better. You know, that's becoming part of society with the support of society, but it's becoming part of it as well.
And I would say, I think, what, 20, 30 years ago, there weren't all these residential homes, people.
No, and they were just getting started,
Yeah.
but they were nowhere near to the level or volume of as they are today. You know, I mean, you know, but you know, I wanted to touch on one more thing, and that was, you know, we talked about communication and, you know, the lack thereof sometimes with our guys. I don't know if you remember, years ago, 60 Minutes did a thing on something called facilitated communication, and we got caught up in it. And what it was is the teachers were supporting the student's hand over a keyboard, and the student was communicating by typing, essentially. Remember this? And it was a wonderful, smashing success. And our teachers would send home notes that Jonathan did this and this when asked about Dad's favorite football team. He wrote in the Giants.
Okay.
And you know, different examples like that. It's exciting. You know, it was just the greatest thing in the world. And then 60 Minutes did a feature on it and proved it to be bunk. You know, just decimated the whole concept that this was a workable program. And they showed examples of how and why and so on. I don't question 60 Minutes. What I do question is they didn't point out, they pointed out that it wasn't really doing what it said it was doing, but they didn't point out the relationship that was forming between the teacher and the student.
Okay.
True or not, result-driven or not, pressing these buttons on a keyboard, not relevant, because the enthusiasm that teacher was demonstrating with that student, we're getting somewhere.
Well, it was more important than if he's typing something.
It's more important than the result.
Yeah.
The relationship was just, you know, you could see the growth in the professional. You could see the teacher just, you know, all consumed with this energy that, okay, we got something here.
Yeah.
And not to recognize that, I think was terrible. It was just a terrible thing to do.
No, I think I do remember that. So how long has Jonathan been in the residential?
It'll be 2 years in June.
And
which is so hard to believe.
What's been the biggest change in him that you, other than you were telling me earlier before we started, he doesn't want to come home as much.
He doesn't want to come home as much. So now I have to make homemade raviolis to get him to get into the house. Excellent. That is the biggest change. He doesn't want to come home as much. Another big change is that he socializes an awful lot with his peers that he lives with.
Are they all around the same age? Or?
Give or take.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give or take a lot sometimes. Actually, there's quite a wide range of age differences. He's the youngest.
Okay.
Which I think is a good thing for him.
Yeah.
But there's he attends the Elks Club. They have a dance once a month. And he's out there.
Okay.
I think he's an honorary elk. Now that I think about it. So he participates with the Elks Club. He does a lot of things with his day program. Meals on Wheels he participates in. Is it the Beltron?
Beltron's on Red Oak Wolf Road.
Yeah,
Is a senior.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, does he
goes there.
Does he work kind of a little job?
Those are the jobs that he does. Meals on Wheels.
They deliver to the Beltron.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Things like that. But through his residential program, he'll do shopping just like anybody else.
Would they go in a group?
Help out? No, 2 guys maybe, or a small group.
Okay.
A small group, but usually more than 1 guy at a time. And he'll go out to dinner, go out for pizza, go out and get his hair cut, get a good night's sleep before the next day's work.
Okay.
It's really quite something. I mean, to think about what we do and the commitment we make to people in our society who probably wouldn't have, not probably, who wouldn't have such a wonderful opportunity in this life, to think of the things that we offer.
Well, I mean,
it's amazing.
I mean, all I can think of is it must be 35 or 40 years ago. You remember when it was all the Geraldo Rivera did this thing. Now it wasn't an autistic people, but people maybe like your son would be in some kind of institution.
Yeah.
I mean, that's totally changed. I mean, what were you saying? The center has 51 group homes.
51 residential.
Residential homes.
Yeah. 51 residential homes for a variety of people with a variety of skill levels, and
they're obviously living. They get up, go to work. They're living
well,
a normal life.
They're living well, and it's it's a tribute to this community, certainly the agency I work for, which it's just a privilege to work for the center.
Now, you were saying when you first started taking your son over there, you didn't work there.
No.
Did that make you become a little more interested in wanting to work there?
Well, I worked there years ago when I was younger.
Oh, okay.
In the late 70s.
Okay.
I worked in the residential program, and then drifted away, went to school, etc. And then I started using the pool with my son, and I certainly became very, very, very interested in getting back in the game.
Okay. Well, and how many in your typical? I know you only work in the pool area, aquatics.
Yeah.
What percentage of people that come to the center maybe have some kind of level of autism? Is that one of the most? Or you guys? I know you guys cover. You guys cover.
Yeah, we do. In terms of behaviors that have the characteristics of autism, might hit the spectrum. How many? Oh boy, it's really hard to say.
Well, you guys help such a wide range of people with all kinds of disabilities, whether physical or neurological. Is that
right? Exactly.
Okay. Well, then I guess what is the ultimate sort of? Your son's now 25 in a residential. Now, is the ultimate goal? Will he always be in a residential home, or do people end up living on their own, or what's the? Or does it depend on?
I'm glad you brought that up, because in this meeting I had with the residential staff, they're just wonderful. They tell me that the sky's the limit for him.
Okay. Well,
I mean, there's a lot of growth potential there. Where he takes it, it's going to be largely up to him.
Yeah.
And I believe that. I believe that wholeheartedly. And his mom and I will push him, to get as far as he can go. And when we say push, there's a lot of encouragement, but there's a lot of expectations too.
Okay.
So much of it is on him, because the support is there, the direction is there, the encouragement, the education, the instructional, it's all there.
Yeah.
Now,
well, if it sounds like from what you've been
him.
telling me from both you and your wife and from the center, or the staff at the. Now, I saw you, Glenn. Did you have something you wanted to? Did you mention everything you were?
Well, we did the mind and body approach, the motor development, just to touch again on the initial stage of the diagnosis. And I don't know if most parents are typical, if they're like my wife and myself, and that is to shy away from traditional prescription medication and look more toward the holistic and getting that body healthy. You can do both. Mm-hmm. You can do both. And, I would just strongly recommend following your doctor's advice, doing a lot of reading on your own, do your own research and educate yourself in terms of what has worked in the past and what testimonials are not as for lack of a better word, legit as a double-blind study, of course. But, you can get a feel for what people are saying about a certain holistic approach. You can get a feel for, a doctor's impression about a certain medication. Mm-hmm. Be patient. Know that it takes a while to stumble upon the right combination of medicine, because you have to slowly introduce it to the system. If it's not working, you have to slowly withdraw it. So, research it, be smart about it, and
Well, I know that when I started as a librarian 25 years ago, the number of books we had on various aspects of autism maybe filled up a shelf or so. Now in our library here, that section of the library, it's like 4 or 5 shelves. I mean, there's books coming out all the time. There's always research, there's always articles.
Right.
And now there's in April, when the show is on, it's both World Autism Awareness and National Autism Awareness Month. So, well, Rich, you've given us great insight as both a parent and a professional dealing with an autistic child, and we thank you for stopping by, and hopefully people watching get a good idea, and some of the things you've said will help them also. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Joe. A pleasure as always.
Okay, that's it for now, and we'll see you next time.